Ecology, which is basically a research-focused degree rather than taught or normal masters. So normal masters, you have a bunch of modules where you get taught in lectures and things. I have a lot of my credits, a lot of my degree comes from this research project I'm doing here. So as Paola mentioned, basically I was able to come here because my supervisor knew Paola and come here previously, so it was a really good experience. So I never expected to be able to spend almost 3 months now. So I'm nearing the end of my stay, which is why I'm giving a bit of a presentation. My project here is basically on moths and light pollution. So moths themselves, I've actually got a couple here if you guys want to pass them around. They're still alive, so you guys want to just, individual ones out and pass them along. Yeah. There's some good ones in there from Paola's moth trap this morning. So she basically put out a moth trap this morning and got some of those and captured them. Some of the very nice ones she's kept.
James, there's some people here from Germany. I'm not too sure if they know all the English.
Oh, sorry.
But I think Levan probably can help a little bit.
I hope.
Who's the translator?
Speak a bit more slowly.
Yes, sorry, I'm usually quite a quick speaker, so yeah, basically.
But that is moth. Moth.
Traças. In Portuguese.
But yeah, so these are basically butterflies that fly around at night. A lot of people know them mostly as little brown things that come into their houses and don't do an awful lot. And they might eat your carpets or something similar. But I'm mainly focused on them because they also pollinators. So like bees and honeybees, they pollinate flowers, especially in the summer. But they're during the night time, so whereas bees and the rest are active during the day, moths are the most active pollinators during the night. Paola's done a lot of research on moths here and found the amount of pollen they carry, and that's something I'll revisit later on. But basically, I'm focused on sort of artificial light at night and how that impacts the moths. So street lights and street lamps and stuff, and how that impacts moth abundance, which is the number of moths, and moth diversity, which is the different number of species. I'm also trying to investigate the amount of pollen they carry in comparison between these two sort of sites with street lamps, sites without street lamps, and I'll basically walk you through that today. So my project here started 9 weeks ago, where basically I did a vegetation survey on different areas around Rocha, near within walking distance basically. I've put little caps on here. I'm not sure if you guys can see it sat down. But yeah, I can't really lift them. So yeah, if you guys want to stand, up and look, you can. I'm not sure how much that will get away with you, but so the gold caps are lit sites, and the green caps are unlit sites. We're here-ish. So that's where we are. That goes up towards the railway, and that goes down towards the estuary. So the gold ones are with street lamps, and the green ones are without street lamps. Yeah, they were paired based on vegetation sampling I did, so I looked at all the flowering plants at the beginning of my project and paired them up using some stats method. I don't really know very intricately. And then basically what I did over the next 8 weeks was every 2 weeks, the 3 nights of the week, I sampled at 4 sites. So we paired them up again. Basically did a lit site and unlit site paired, and visited 4 of those sites a night every 2 weeks, until we did all 12. So we've got 12 sites, so we have a lot of data we can compare and basically try and find some good conclusions from. Hold on, where are we at? Yeah, so these sites are, so we have lit sites with street lamps and unlit sites without street lamps. We visited them and we used a bunch of different methods to investigate the moths and how it changes between the two. So one of the main things we used was on the nights we put this out, which is a moth trap. It's basically a big metal box with a funnel with a light in the funnel. This light is a UV light, so moths themselves, they have blue shifted vision. So a lot of moths are red blind, so they can't see the colour red, but in comparison they can see into the ultraviolet spectrum, so they can see further blue than we can, which is why this is a good light. So it basically shines at night, and they'll come to it like moth to a flame. And they'll fall in because they're not overly bright. And we have some egg boxes inside, so like egg cartons. And they really like the material of it, so they'll basically sleep there at night. Or they'll fly in, so they get confused as to why they're stuck inside a mailbox. Then they'll rest there until the morning, where they'll warm up and start to become a little bit more active. So me and Paolo mostly, I think it was mostly me and Paolo. Diego helped as well on a morning, and I think that was everyone helped on mornings. We basically went on the morning after we set up the moth trap, and collected the moths in the tubes and containers that are basically passed around now. We labelled them based on the site and based on the record that we did, because we did every site 4 times, and then identified them to species level if we could, so down to each species, and then wrote them went by computer. So it's a very big Excel file. We think we caught over the last 8 weeks 2,306 moths, and of those we kept around 520 in the freezer. So sadly, during this project, I have had to do some destructive sampling, which is basically where you catch the samples and then you have to kill them off. So we put them in the freezer to sort of chill them until they pass away, sadly. But the reason why we did that is so we can choose them and swab them for pollen. So I'll take this off because it's a bit annoying. But so after we froze them in the freezer, we did 11 moths randomly selected from each site because we didn't have enough slides, like glass slides, to do every single one. And what we did next was, and this does smell a little bit, sadly, but I'm not sure if I can actually tilt it. So this is moths from the from the 3rd sampling site. Just be extra careful when you pass that around. Yeah, it does. If you don't want to smell it, you can pass it back. But these are labelled moths that are from each site. So each row is 11 moths from a site. And these will be pinned and then swabbed. So pinned moths are moved across to here for some reason. So they get pinned like this. Again, they're all dead, or they should be. Yeah, they get pinned with these little metal spikes. And then I basically go with a cube of some sort of jelly. It's like a red dyed jelly, which I think I've got here as well. Yeah. So I actually have, it's labelled "Do Not Eat," because it's you make it the same way you make actual jelly, except it's not edible. I don't think. I haven't tried it. But basically, we cut these into little cubes, pick these up, and swab them, and then we put the cube onto a glass slide. We melt the glass slides. We put the glass slide over a candle, and we melt the jelly down until, where are they at? We have basically, this is a whole, it takes a little to get that, but I can get that without breaking anything. There you go. So they become these little nice slides. They actually smell nice because they've got, they've got jelly, but the jelly doesn't smell. It's the nail varnish. So we seal the slides with nail varnish to stop them from deteriorating over time. That's, you can put underneath a microscope and try and see the pollen grains. What is it? Pollen grains. So on the moths, actually on flower, if I can find a photo of flower somewhere. Yeah, so we have photos of flowers up here. So you know the yellow sort of grains on flower stem.
Yes.
Like
Amen.
yes. So during pollination, so this is how plants reproduce. Well, flowers reproduces. The pollen goes to what's the stamen? Oh, it's somewhere up here.
It's the
Anthera, which is yes. On here is pollen grains.
It's the masculine.
Yes. So it's the
Sexual.
reproduction of flowers. Basically, the way bees do it, they pick up the pollens, put them on a mass, and accidentally transfer them across. So with pollination is never on purpose by animals, apart from us, because we're really different. So these basically, the pollen grains get stuck on the moths because they're very fluffy, and they visit flower to flower and they drink the nectar, so the sugary liquid in the flower. And these pollen grains accidentally get left where they need to be, and the flower is able to reproduce. So I'm swabbing these moths for pollen to basically see how moths under light pollution, so under the streetlights, differ from moths that I catch in areas without streetlights. So seeing if they have more pollen, so they're potentially better pollinators in areas without streetlights, or if they have more pollen in areas with streetlights or less. So that's the concern, is that they would be less, and therefore worse pollinators. That's basically the whole process of the project. We just did this 4 times, so we've got loads of these slides. This whole bucket's full of the slides, and we will have 3 more buckets full of slides that I will have to look at and count.
And identify.
So I've got a lot more work ahead of me. And so far during the project, basically the things we know currently from the UK. So my supervisor Darren, who panel I mentioned before, he's done work on artificial light and night in the UK, so streetlights and how they affect insects and invertebrates in general. So we have research done in the north, I think, that's sort of seeing that when you put a streetlight up above a hedgerow, the number of insects in the hedgerow halves. So it's really quick as well. It's within like 2 or 3 days. So you put a streetlight up, insects half in number, which is obviously is a really big impact for the environment around these lights. And we can see sort of from that how we're impacting these insects and what impact we might have on the ecosystem at large because of that. So insects don't only do their own thing, they feed birds, and a lot of them pollinate and that kind of thing. So it would impact flowers, it would impact birds, it would impact higher chains up there as well. So flowers don't pollinate and they don't reproduce. A lot of things won't have food for them. And it's a bit of a cascade. So we're trying to see here how that differs from the UK, because we know a bunch about it in the UK. We don't know as much about it here. In addition to the stuff with the moth traps and the moths, we also do, every night we put out a moth trap, we also go do sampling at the sites. So at the sites we do something called sweep netting, which is actually, annoyingly, the sweep net's behind there, which is basically this big net with like a rigid rim, where you sweep it through grass, and the idea is you try and knock the caterpillars that are on the grass from the grass, and then you can see how many of these caterpillars are at each site. So we're trying to compare numbers of caterpillars from site to site and see if again, the streetlights impact them. So everything's focused around the streetlights and their presence or absence there. We also do beam counting, which is where I shine a really fancy torch in the sky, like a narrow beamed torch. So, and you basically look up and you count how many insects pass through this beam, because a lot of insect flight happens above a certain level. So when you're sat there and you're doing like moth trapping with that, you might not catch every single one, so it's a good idea to try and see how many of these are actually flying around the area. The idea with that is to see how the streetlights affect moths. So if we, for example, had more moths on sites with streetlights even in the sky, but less found in moth traps, that would mean that the streetlights are distracting the moths. So less moth presence around flowers and things that they need to eat from and also pollinate, and more sort of just aimless wandering near this streetlight, which obviously isn't very good with impact. And we can sort of see how we can mitigate that as well from that. So, for example, you could turn off the lights and they would move to where they would naturally be during the day, or during the night even. That's most of everything about the project. I'll just talk a little bit about what we've found so far. So, again, I haven't had the chance to look at any of the pollen yet, so I don't have any findings about that, but overall we've had, again, the 2,300 moths of 160 different species. So, quite a lot of different species. I know, it's a lot. Luckily, Paola knows most of them, and has been able to help me identify them when it comes to actually getting and processing the samples. Other than that, we can see quite a clear divide between lit sites and unlit sites, how many moths we get in the moth trap. So for example, yesterday morning, we did our very last sample, or very last collecting of the moth traps in on the morning. and we got a new highest number of moths in a moth trap, which was 164 moths in one single moth trap. So, which, oh no, it wasn't this one. So sadly, it's not actually this exact moth trap, but it's one of the ones in the corner there. I think it was number 7. We had 160 in that one, I think it was 124 in the other unlit site, so these 2 sites there. And then in the lit sites we did on the same night, we got, I think it was 30, yeah, and 30 and around 40, I think was the second one. So obviously a massive decrease. It follows along the lines of what we expect to find from the previous studies in the UK. So you can see it's a very similar impact upon the moths, but again, I haven't actually done the proper stats yet, so it might be that it's more of an impact or less of an impact than we see from that specific day. But that day sort of shows that there is this massive impact that lights have. So in comparison to what we could do as just general people, I know a lot of people sometimes have lights on at night for outside their houses for not much of a reason. Those, like from this, obviously that would be a really big impact on night flying insects. So if you potentially have those, it would be really good for those insects if you like just have them on when you exactly need them on. Like for example, here we have lights that are motion sensing. So we have like oh, it's alright. We're nearing the end anyway. But yes, so if you could switch those off, or if you could have motion detecting ones where they'd only turn on when people are actually actively walking around, that would really help the insects around your houses. And obviously, if you could plant potentially flowers that would help moths as well, so flowers that have high nectar content, so high sugary liquid content, or long stems. A lot of flowers that look really nice have those, so it wouldn't impact the look of your garden at all, I don't think, if you try to plant those. I personally really like those plants. But yeah, that's most of my project, I think. So yeah, thank you for listening. Any questions?